And it's Steve Tasker who has been all over the field.
Kind of unique. He was kind of a dual-role player for you.
Steve!
A balloon.
Steve! A blimp? We're not even in the stratosphere of normalcy here. Well, it's a Thursday, Steve. And something happened after we arrived at work. It was put out on the One Bills Live Twitter account. And for our MSG viewers, they can see it immediately. For those of you listening on the radio airwaves, Steve and I are not only dressed in the same exact shirt today, and this was not planned, but we also both have gray golf pants on. The only slight difference is Steve is wearing gray shoes and I am wearing black shoes, but that is where it begins and ends.
We're both wearing Cole Haans.
But, yes, that is true, courtesy of one Steve Tasker. But I will say this. Steve and I essentially have the same Bills swag wardrobe in many respects. So
right.
This was only a matter of when, not if it was going to happen.
I've said it before. I counted. I have 60. 60. That's 5 dozen, right? That's 5 dozen different
Bills polos
and quarter zips.
Yeah. I'm probably half of that.
Yeah. So what kind of, multiply the combinations that we could do. And now some of them are do overlap. I mean, but
right.
Man, oh man, that's hard to do.
But we've done it.
We did it.
It's
happened.
Thursday, March 25th.
They took the picture and I tweeted out. Somebody said, "Wow, Tasker looks huge standing next to you because you're shorter."
I'm a short man.
You're shorter than me, and I tweeted that I was 6 feet 5 inches tall.
Which
internet.
If that was the case,
it's the internet. You're
I'd be like 6'2",
right? It's the internet. You're expected not to tell the truth. So I put I was 6'5". That's why. So I pumped us both up.
That'll work. Yeah, I am not a tall human by any stretch.
Yes, well.
Even if you stretch me out. But yes, oh, great, guys. Yeah, let's just do the immediate split screen. Let's make it look even better. My God, we look like a bunch of candy stripers here.
We do look kind of uniform of the day kind of thing. Officer of the day, right?
Oh, man. Yeah, they're enjoying it in the control room far more than we are. But
well, there you go.
We'll leave that there and get to more of the business at hand.
That'd be a horizontal striped shirt, too. We both look a little bit heavy.
Yeah, that's just not good for us. But I guess it could be worse. We could be both wearing green, in which case we'd look like a bunch of floating heads.
I'll say this, though. I would wear the same shirt as you every day if we could get weather like this. It is spectacular outside.
You know it's all going to come crashing down tomorrow. Did you see the forecast for tomorrow?
Do not care.
If you put any lawn furniture out, Steve, on your patio,
I get you.
tie it down.
Totally here. Oh, is it going to blow?
They are saying we might reach 70 miles per hour.
Really?
Tomorrow.
How's that?
Look, I don't know. Believe me, I'm the last person to ask about ISO bars and stuff.
60 miles per hour usually is the limit for around here. They
said we may hit 70.
70 is a big number. I might lose some shingles.
Yeah, I don't want to lose shingles. My roof is only 3 years old, so I prefer not to lose shingles.
Right. Totally with you.
But, man, I don't know what it is, but when the wind kicks up here, it's no joke. It is no joke.
Yeah.
So that is apparently coming tomorrow in the late afternoon, evening.
So how long is that going to last? Is that like through the weekend or
I
just
didn't
24
look.
hours?
I didn't read far enough to see how long it's going to last.
70 miles per hour. It can't stick around that long.
But my wife last week, she saw this nice weather coming. She's like, come on, we got to take some of the patio furniture out. Just give me just give me the love seat.
It's a hair early.
Just give me the love seat, and I don't want anything. I said, okay, we can do that. So we pulled that out. 5 days later,
right.
Here comes a.
We did do the first step. Everybody's the same way. You got all that in your house or stored somewhere in the shed.
I have it wrapped up in a giant canvas, right on the patio.
Right.
So can we take something? I'm like, okay, we can take something.
Right. So you take there, but you
don't trust it though.
It's stages, right? Say, I'll do this much, but I ain't doing any more because I know I'll be out here heaving this stuff under something to keep it from getting wet, right? So once it gets summertime, I don't care because when the days are warm, it's going to dry out fairly quickly. But like now, we've just been burned too many times, right? You put that stuff out there and you end up, for me, it's like in my pond or floating around or it's off in the woods somewhere. I got to, schlep over there and drag that out. Right? So I'm like, I've been burned too many times. And it's March.
Yeah, let's remember that. I told you, Steve, it's fake spring.
Yeah, but it's a pretty good fake spring, man.
Well,
This
it's
is a pretty
great.
good stretch.
But
It's a pretty good stretch.
It's longer than it usually lasts.
It is. And I'm telling you what, we're going to have a couple of days here, no question. But I think after that couple of days, it's going to be nice again. I mean, this may be an, dare I say it, an early turn to the weather. It's already early. The pins are in at my course.
Yeah.
I've been playing all week after the show. And playing like a pig, mind you. But still, I'm out walking the course. And it's dry. It's been great. It's been great. It's got to come back. It's got to bounce back after these next couple of days, right?
I see what the forecast says.
What's it say?
Well, it was saying what you're saying. Next week after
It's gonna
this.
be nice.
Well,
Yeah.
there's a chance of snow Sunday night, just so you know. Just so you know. I don't know if it's going to accumulate because the ground's going to probably be too warm from what we've had the last few days.
Well, we haven't reached that
But there's
yet.
a chance of snow Sunday night into
We haven't
Monday.
reached that yet. I don't think. And let me
That's why I
think.
call it fake spring.
Let me think. It might be. I might have got back past me. I was looking forward to it. The plow pile might be gone at my house. One of them is. I think maybe the plow piles are gone at my house. You know what I'm talking about, right?
That's a two-word phrase that doesn't exist in many other parts of the country.
Right. The plow pile is gone. That's
pile
a
of
huge
snow, yeah.
signal that spring is around the corner. I think they are. I was going to check it and I forgot. I think they're gone. The big one's gone.
Yeah.
Because we had the.
Well,
had
I
my-
mean, you get up to 65, 70 degrees. I mean, I would hope it is.
I was a total grandpa the other day.
Oh, no.
I had my 4-year-old granddaughter and my 2-year-old grandson out there playing around. I said, "Why don't you go over there shovel that snow and spread that out so it melt?" I am sitting there,
Disperse that, will you? You
I'm
guys
sitting
got a
on
lot
the-
of energy.
I'm sitting on the lawn, in the chair on the porch, waving my hand, go, "Yeah, spread that out."
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Right? I am a total.
That's official grandpa
total
material.
grandpa mode.
It'll
be fun.
You just completed the picture when you said, "I'm in the lawn chair on the porch."
Right.
You didn't have to say anything else. That is all in grandpa material right there.
And they're out there doing
and
it,
then
man. They got their
then
little-
you capped it.
They got their little toys.
Then you capped it by saying, "I'm sitting in my lawn chair on the porch and I'm waving my hand." If that is not a grandpa gesture,
Total.
go over there and do
Right?
some of that while I sit here on my duff. I don't know what is.
I'll tell you what, it'll be fun. You can spread that snow out as much as you want. See if you can do it.
See if you can get it all to melt.
It was still, they're so little. It was so good.
Got a lot of energy,
I was a
though.
total grandpa.
There were some minor goings-on around the AFC East with respect to free agency. We saw that the Jets signed Eagles veteran defensive end Vinny Curry, who's a pass rusher, so they'll presumably have him on one edge and Carl Lawson on the other. They also signed free agent running back Tevin Coleman, who is obviously familiar with the Jets' offensive system, having played in the same one in San Francisco. So the Jets finalized that deal yesterday, as he'll jump right into Mike LaFleur's offense, and off he goes with zero learning curve. And then you had the Patriots trying to re-sign their defensive end Lawrence Guy. He visited the Dolphins and then left without a deal and is now talking to the Patriots, and it seems like it's trending towards a signing. So it looks like the Patriots will probably get Lawrence Guy back into the fold. One of their 5-technique defensive end guys, does a lot of the dirty work and does a pretty good job of it. Here was an interesting one, Steve. This caught my eye. Browns had a free agent visit from Jadeveon Clowney. Now, he left the facility. No deal was completed. This is a guy who I think is tough for people to figure out.
Wow.
Mercurial player. Don't know what you're going to get every week. It's hard to believe that the guy is deeply passionate about football. Like, football doesn't strike me as something that burns in his soul. You know what I mean?
It seems like he's got
the fire in the belly.
He's running around with engine problems.
Yeah.
And the guy's supremely gifted, no question about it. And there's nothing that says he's a bad dude or anything. Like, he hasn't, he has never had any off the field issues and all of that. So it's not like, the guy's a criminal. It's just
no.
It's all. No, I don't want to go there. I'm just saying his problems are more football type. You just don't see you don't get a full effort. Right. You don't get a guy who wears it on his sleeve. A guy who is going 100 miles an hour. If you could put, for instance, Justin Zimmer in that body, you got a Hall of Famer.
Mm-hmm.
Jadeveon Clowney has always been a gifted guy, and even when he was with J.J. Watt, guys that are that physically gifted always are saddled with, finger quotes, underachieving status because you see guys with lesser physical abilities do more.
Yeah. And I think it says a lot that a guy that is that physically talented and that physically gifted, even in a restricted market with a restrictive cap, is still out there. I think that says a lot.
There's a ton of tape on him. That's why.
Yeah. And the last two teams that took a chance on him didn't get overwhelming returns. Seattle signed him, had a couple of nice games for them, but didn't dominate. And with his physical ability, that guy should dominate. Yeah. And then he went after that to Tennessee last season and did nothing for them. Literally nothing.
Zero. Putting it in a context of what they're doing at One Bills Drive with Sean McDermott, he just hasn't displayed the hunger to get better.
Right, and that's why you look at him and you say, this guy doesn't have the DNA that the Bills look for in their players. Right. You know what I mean?
Right.
They want guys that football is viewed by the player coming in here as a daily process where you're looking to get 1% better every single day. Doesn't matter what day it is. Doesn't matter what the score on the board is during the game. You know what you're going to get out of that player every single Sunday, every single day in practice, and there are no questions. And as you said, with Jadeveon Clowney, the check engine light comes on an awful lot.
Right.
And that's the problem.
And that's why the guy still doesn't have a job. And it's also why he's gotten a lot of chances and keeps getting another chance.
Mm-hmm.
Because the team that took a chance on him is done with him. That's telling. His value monetarily is dropping, and dropping like a stone. There's just a lot of teams just don't want to make room for a guy like that. Yeah. Now, Cleveland is a little bit different. If you've got a guy like a Myles Garrett who does have all of those things. He's got the physical abilities, and he seems like he's got a motor. And he's a guy that some other guys rally around, and he's starting to put it together as a pro. Perfect spot for Jadeveon Clowney to come in and be a complimentary piece.
Yeah.
But what are you going to pay him? The price is dropping. Why hurry? Why hurry? Cleveland was pretty good without him last year. If he wants to come in and jump on board, okay, fine. But you're not going to be paid like a marquee piece. No way.
Yeah, I mean, they had Olivier Vernon there the last couple of years opposite Garrett, and I know he had a bad injury last year and his season got cut short, but I would take Olivier Vernon over Jadeveon Clowney 800 times out of 800. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if someone takes a swing and is, desperate enough to try to give that thing a third try.
Yeah,
because the last two teams have been sorely disappointed.
Yeah, and so while we're talking Jadeveon Clowney and stuff, the Penn State had their pro day today.
Oh,
and so we're talking about guys with fast motors and guys with physical abilities, guys who look like it. So this guy Jason Owe, who has been mocked to the Bills as an edge rusher kind of guy. You're thinking, okay, well, who is he? So he goes out today. He weighs 257 pounds. He ran a 4.3640. 4.3640.
The watches ranged from 4.36 to 4.4 in terms of the scouts' watches at Pro Day.
The guy weighed 200 and close to 260 pounds.
Yeah,
that's
moving,
dude.
That's moving. Now,
that's other world
the concerns with him are as follows. Number one, he's a redshirt sophomore. Number two, he's a one-year starter. And when there isn't that body of work, it gives scouts pause. They want to have something to go on. You can see the athletic ability. You know it's elite. And you say to yourself, okay, there's elite athletic ability here. That should translate at the highest level of football. He's still going to be faster than most at his position, bending the edge, all of that stuff.
I'll say this.
But the body of work is so minimal, it's going to give scouts pause.
Yes, and it should. But by the same token, that's exactly the kind of guy that would fit in a Buffalo system where they're going to slowly, methodically get him to a point where he gets all the things he needs before he gets thrown in. If somebody drafts that kid, say a team like Jacksonville or whoever drafts him and they expect him to be plugged in and play, I don't think that's as beneficial to him as it would be getting drafted by a team like Buffalo, who at the very least will rotate him in even on day one. That's the best case scenario for a guy like that. They did it with Ed Oliver. They did that with A.J. Epineza. And they would give him a chance to get his feet under him and give him a chance to earn what he gets on the field so he's ready for it when it happens, rather than getting thrown in whether he sinks or swims. Particularly a guy who doesn't have the depth of production and the amount of snaps at a higher level that this guy does.
This guy is probably not going to help you this year. He had a basketball-first background. He's young in football. The knock on him is he doesn't have the on-field instincts. He's tremendously gifted physically. But in terms of the instincts and, reading plays and setting up an offensive tackle, those are elements of his game that are just flat out not there yet. So the question becomes, if you're a team like the Bills looking to get to the top of the mountain after getting pretty darn close last year, do you want to use a first-round draft choice on a guy that's probably not going to help you until 2023, 2022 at the earliest? I wonder if you make that investment in round one on a player like that. Maybe you do, but if you can do better and find a player who's comparable in grade and has a better chance of helping you now, I don't know how you still go with this guy.
Right. But that kind of guy may be the only kind of guy that falls to number 30 in this draft.
That's true. That could be the case also.
That may be a guy like that never falls to you in other years. You have to stink more than the Bills did this year to get up high enough to draft a guy with that physical ability. And then if you've got, and let's face it, who's he coming in and replacing on your last year's roster would probably be, Vernon Butler or Trent Murphy?
Well, you're going to – if you draft this guy, he's making your roster just by virtue of the fact that he's your first-round draft choice.
Right.
And that leaves someone else as the odd man out. Is it the newly signed 3fe08da? Is it Darryl Johnson? Is it,
Right.
Could be anybody. It's probably not A.J. Epineza.
Right.
If he shows out in camp and looks like he's ready now, hell, could be Mario Addison. Who knows?
Yes, that's right. It could be. It could be.
But based on what we've seen from Oweh, which is limited tape, one-year starter, young in football, doesn't have the instincts yet, may not have them. We don't know.
Right. Don't know about him.
I don't know how, even if he is Buffalo's draft choice, that he comes in and flips the depth chart on its head. I don't know if I can see that happening. He'd have to be pretty damn special
certainly,
in training camp.
Well, he'd have, and here's the thing. He's got to be special between his ears because physically he's there.
Yeah.
And that's hard to quantify. That's hard to get a handle on. Is he going to be a guy who comes in and turns into a guy like Gabe Davis?
Yeah.
Is he going to come in and turn into a guy that's wise beyond his years like a Tre'Davious White? I don't have any idea to know that. So they'll try and find out, and the more like that he is, the higher he will be taken. But you're right.
He's high risk, high reward. I mean, that's what he is, because the body of work isn't there, but the physical attributes are elite. And so you say, okay, well, if we're right about this guy, I mean, this is going to be your number one pass rusher on your team in 3 years.
Are we good enough to win games with him on our team not contributing at a high level?
Yeah.
Are we good enough to win games this year and wait on him to develop? And when we look at him, how long will it take Eric Washington, Leslie Frazier, Starlo Tulele, Jerry Hughes, Ed Oliver, A.J. Epineza, all those guys, Tremaine Edmonds, how long will it take them to help him be good enough? The whole organization's in it together.
And, I mean, you're going for it now. I just don't know how.
I get that. And you're right. The team was very close last year, but I think this is a team that's going to structure itself on going forward every year. They're not going to get this cap. They'd be sitting gold if the cap had not gotten chopped. They'd be fine. They'd be way fine. So this year's a little bit of an aberration. I think this is a club and an organization that wants to be in it long term every year, have a shot, be competitive. And you got to either in their worst years, they got to win and in on Game 17.
I just wonder if the thinking goes along these lines. Do you go so far as to say, whether you think Owe is the best player on the board at the time you're picking or not, is the conversation, does it get to this place where you say, are we doing this year's team a disservice by choosing a player with our first-round draft choice that probably won't help us until 2022 at the earliest? Are we doing the 2021 roster a disservice by drafting a player of that caliber, knowing he's probably not going to help us this year,
or at least
when
not
we're
much
trying
this year,
to get to the Super Bowl?
Unless the kid can work his way in the second half of the year, get on the field a couple times, plus do some special team stuff, contribute in that way, maybe be.
Is that enough for your first-round draft choice?
Depends.
Is it?
Yeah, I mean, listen, what did A.J. Epineza do? What Ed Oliver do?
Well, that was a second-round pick, but I understand what you're saying.
What Ed Oliver do? Ed got in, and he was rotated in that way.
Right, but
Same
by the
thing.
second half of the year, he was playing – he was playing the equivalent of what would be starter snaps in a rotational system his rookie year.
There's 3 first-round guys who are really contributing: Josh Allen, Tremaine Edmonds, and Tre'Davious White. The other guys it took them longer than those guys.
Right.
And it actually should have taken Josh longer, but because of 2018 and Nate Peterman, he got pushed in, and A.J. McCarron and all that. So,
right.
But, yeah, there you go. So this may be, and let's face it, too, this team, I don't care who you take first. Pick your guy. It's harder to be good enough to contribute on this team than it was 2 years ago when they were 6-10.
I don't deny that for a second.
So what do you expect from this guy?
Yeah.
On this roster, the way it is right now.
Yeah. I think if you're drafting a first-rounder, though, that's a guy who should be competing for a starting job right out of the gate, even at 30.
Okay.
So I'm not saying he's definitively the starter, but he's competing for a role because he's one of the best 30 players in the draft.
I get it.
Well,
here's the thing. Well, here's the thought then, and you got to everything else gets thrown in there. So if you're in that mindset where this guy's got to help us and compete right away, you're not looking at that spot at that position in this draft. You're looking at corner.
Yeah. That is where I'm looking.
Right? I mean, that's what you're thinking, right?
And that is where I'm looking.
And this is a deep corner draft.
Well,
which means you
there
can get
should
the best
be players
of a bunch.
in the Bills' range there.
You can get the best of a bunch that are going to be on the board. So, yeah, and that means this – if you take a corner in this draft, you're going to click off a lot of boxes that are very favorable for your system and your little checklist for corners.
I realize that Brandon Beane and his scouting department probably do not think that way. They don't say, well, we need a corner in round 1. They don't think that way.
No,
we know
they don't
that.
want to have to think
we
that
know
way.
that the way they draft proves they don't think that way. But I'm just going from the perspective of this is your first-round draft choice. you're near the top of the mountain in the NFL, you want somebody with your first-round pick that's going to be able to get on the field and help make you better.
Yeah, and that's the thing, too. Yes, it may be 2022 before Jason Owe helps you as a build in a significant way. But you want somebody now that can do that. There's not going to be much difference from a guy who helps you now at a different position right away than Owe next year. So you're not losing anything by getting a guy a year earlier, like if Owe was a redshirt junior instead of a redshirt sophomore, and he had another year and he had more tape, and he's like, okay, now he's a little further down the line. He'll contribute earlier. The guy that you get at 30, if that's your philosophy, is going to do that.
Yeah.
Is going to do that.
Let me ask you this. So he has been – I watched some Penn State games this year. He is unquestionably a disruptive player. Like, he disrupts stuff in the backfield pretty consistently.
He's fast.
0 sacks. Does that bother you at all?
A little bit.
0 sacks.
A little bit. Certainly he's got physical abilities, but he's young. He's a young player that's going to throw in. And the NFL, the NFL is nothing like the NHL. You don't draft a 17-year-old kid because he is not going to be able to hang in there.
Yeah.
The younger they get, and Tremaine Edmonds was, in my opinion, the only teenager that's ever been drafted that's done it. And he's a special kid between his ears. Mm-hmm. He's got an intellect and a maturity about him that allowed him to play and get drafted in the NFL when he's 19 and step right on the field and do it. There have been others, but it's rare. You got to have some life experiences in football to walk into an NFL locker room where you're talking to a 30-year-old, 6'5", 300-pound guy that's got a wife and 3 kids and has been a war veteran in like a guy like Alejandro Villanueva from Pittsburgh. And you're going to come in and give him
that guy
you're going to impart him some wisdom? No. So it is a rough room to walk into an NFL locker room and contribute. So that is a problem with this Jason Owe. Not only is he he's a young dude, he's a redshirt sophomore, he's also a young football player.
Yeah.
I'm not saying he can't do it.
Right. But it gives you pause, like I was saying earlier. It gives you pause.
It does, and his ability causes you to have a conversation about it. That it's unbelievable. That 40 time at 260 pounds is
stupid.
It jumps. It jumps off the page. Like you're like if you see that, I'm like I've got it right here on video.
You're watching him run
I'm watching him do it. The guy looks like a Greek statue.
Does he run? He look
running
like a safety out there. I mean that.
And he's the guy looks huge, and he doesn't have you see these guys these 40-yard dash times with these guys that come out and they run like track guys, like straight up and down.
Yeah.
This guy's running all over the place. He looks like a beanbag doll thrown. I mean, his arms he's got terrible form. He's got fast. I mean, the guy you talk about raw. That guy's steak tartare. I'm telling you. So it's amazing because I watch that I watch that stuff.
Yeah.
He's not. This is a guy that looks like he just walked off the street and ran a 40. It's not like he's been training for it, changing it, getting his arm swing right.
Nobody was coaching him.
Rising up out of his starting block, head down, getting up and watching, looking at these guys, and their eyes are up in the ones. This guy's like, he's fighting it every step of the way, and he runs a 4.36.
Yeah.
Stupid.
This is a roundabout conversation that kind of points to our Twitter poll today, which involves the Bills and their roster building strategy. Should the success of the Bills in 2020 alter their approach, even in the slightest, of building a Super Bowl team in 2021? Your choices are simple. Yes or no. And why, please. Don't just say yes and leave it at that. Tell us why you think yes, the success the Bills had this past season should alter their approach ever so slightly in how they build a Super Bowl team here in 2021. And that draft conversation that Steve and I just had kind of plays into some of the thinking and considerations that you wonder if Brandon Beane, Sean McDermott, and the personnel department will discuss, realizing how close they were. I realize every year is different, and nobody embodies that belief more than Coach McDermott. He says it dozens of times, pounds it into the brains of his players, because the 15 wins you got last year doesn't mean a hill of beans in 2021. But this is a pretty darn good roster that is largely intact from last year. So does that success that the Bills just had, getting all the way to the AFC title game, alter their approach, or should it alter their approach in building a Super Bowl team this year?
Yeah, I think the thing that jumps at me, we talk about it all the time, and I said it right after the season, it's sad when the season ends, the way the Bills did last year when it's over, particularly in a good season like the Bills have had the last couple of years. Because I know as well as anybody, your team's going to change year to year. It's going to be different. Last year was different than it was in 2019. You lose a lot of good guys. They move on. They retire. They go to another team. You lose them in free agency. You don't re-sign them, whatever. So you have a new group of guys. Certainly you have a lot of carryover, but, man, it changes everything when you change 25% of the players on your team. This year, same thing. You think that was going to happen. I think this is the first year. I don't think their philosophy changed this year, but I think the quality of guys they were about to lose was different than it has been.
Yep.
You don't want to lose Milano. You don't want to lose Feliciano and Darrell Williams. You don't want to lose Levi Wallace. You don't want Isaiah McKenzie. You don't want these guys to go. For the first time, it's more like, okay, he was good, but I think we can do better. And maybe there are some of these guys that we could do better. But This was a team last year that was playing at a high level for a lot of the season. And for the first time, their philosophy wasn't to just, fill in for these guys that we've lost because, I think it's not going to be that hard. This was it was the same philosophy, but it was executed in a different way because the guys they wanted to get happened to be the guys that played for them last year. Hard to upgrade from those guys.
Break time for us, but when we come back, we're going to get your thoughts on the Twitter poll from your comments on the tweet sheet. We also welcome your calls at 803-0550, 1-888-550-2550. Open line for you there. Should the success of the Bills in 2020 alter their approach of building a Super Bowl team here in 2021? We got our colleague Matty Glab coming up in the second hour of the show. And in the third hour of the program, former NFL front office executive Scott Pioli joins us at 2 o'clock. Stay tuned. Plenty for you here coming up next on One Bills Live, presented by Kaleida Health. It's Buffalo Bills Radio. Welcome back to One Bills Live. Chris Brown, Steve Tasker. Some other pro day results rolling in. Wide receiver Dwayne Eskridge, Steve, from Western Michigan. Also an accomplished return man. Just ran at his pro day 4.38 and 4.39.
Where do they find these guys?
Hey,
Western Michigan, I guess, right?
Western Michigan's got a decent wide receiver history, my friend.
Do they?
Antonio Brown went there. And there's one other guy whose name is escaping me that was also there. Another good returner. But yeah, Dwayne Eskridge, pretty good kick returner. Averaged 27.5 yards a return last season on kick returns. And, did okay. Did okay up there. He's considered, the day 3 guy, but somebody who can get in the later rounds, help you on returns. I'm not convinced, Steve, that Isaiah McKenzie is going to do kick and punt return. I think he might do punt return, but they may find somebody else to do kick return. Well, you can't
get caught short, so you got to have a couple of guys that can do it. Micah Hyde can certainly catch him.
Right.
Kickoff returns, that's how I got my first real injury in the NFL, was returning kickoffs.
Yeah.
But that was back in the old days. If he's a wide receiver, I'm thinking no.
Maybe not.
We're neck deep. No, we're eyeballs deep in wide receivers and skill guys. right now. I mean, I know it's, you never get caught short in that, but man, they won't.
No, they've got 3 or 4 guys on the reserve future contracts. You're talking Jake Kumaro, Duke Williams. You got those 2 guys, and then you got Isaiah Hodgins coming back from his
There's
redshirt
3
injury
guys
year.
that could probably get on the field for some teams.
Oh, those guys would make the rosters of probably 10, 12 teams in the league.
Right. So, and then you got the 5 guys who are, everybody's counting on. Diggs, Beasley, Davis, Sanders, McKenzie. Those are the 5 that are off the top.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd say it'd be more of a Patrick Peters, Deion Sanders kind of kick returner, a defensive back, a corner that can return kicks. Those are out there.
Mm-hmm.
You see that once in a while. So maybe that.
We will see.
Yeah,
just one of the many.
We're getting closer to being in that spot where it's like,
yeah.
I don't know who they're going to take. They can take anybody.
Which is just the way
exactly
Brandon Beane likes it.
That's where you got to be.
Yeah.
Because if there's a guy out there that's going to be a really good pro, get him.
Yeah.
Don't get some guy that can't play just because you need a body.
Yeah. So as we said, we were going to get to the tweet sheet, which is brought to you by Corrigan Moving Systems, the official equipment moving company of the Buffalo Bills. Should the success of the Bills in 2020 alter their approach of building a Super Bowl team in 2021? J-Mad starts off by saying, no, we don't want to end up in cap hell like in the past. Fill holes where you can in free agency in the draft. Get Josh as many weapons as you can. Build up both lines. I trust Beane and McDermott to do what is necessary to get us back to the Super Bowl.
I'm right there with him.
Yeah,
I'm right there with him. I mean, this. I think it's common for everybody to, and I know it. I know the concept of having this proverbial window that you got to win your Super Bowl in, and I'm not really aspiring to that. The only window you have is, do you have a really good quarterback? That's your window, and as long as he's on your team, you got a chance. A la the Green Bay Packers and the San Francisco 49ers in the 80s with Joe Montana and Steve Young, and then the Indianapolis Colts with Peyton Manning and then Andrew Luck. There's your window. Build it around those guys and give them the support they need and hold them accountable. I mean, that's, there's your window. It's not about your rookie contract, and it's about the guys on the field and who you can find to get there. So your window is perpetual if you –
It's lengthened.
Yes, it's lengthened. It's not to a 5-year rookie deal on your quarterback.
Yeah. Let's go to the phones at 803-0550. We go to Donna in West Seneca. Donna, what do you have for us? You're on One Bills Live.
A strong no. I was watching with my neighbor, and we are both strong no's. And why? They've got good coaching and a good squad. Maybe a little more growth, but if you start, changing, it messes up. It messes up their rhythm. I think they have a good rhythm, and they work well together.
Yeah, and that's probably why, for the most part, they've kept the roster intact through the course of this offseason. Thanks for the call, Donna. And after the success that this team experienced last year, people are like, well, if it's not broke, don't fix it. But we have to remember, I think, that this is a league where nobody really wants to stand pat because they know everybody else is in the same race trying to get a leg up on everybody else.
Yeah.
And we saw the Chiefs do that last year. They went to 2 straight AFC title games and won the Super Bowl, and they reloaded again.
3 straight now.
Well, yeah, 3 now. But I'm saying last offseason
right.
at this time,
Right.
they reloaded. They drafted Clyde Edwards-Helaire at the end of the first round. They weren't hard up for a running back. Now, in hindsight, it was brilliant that they did that because Damian Williams opted out, because of COVID. But, man alive, those guys reloaded.
Yeah.
Added again. So,
And there's another
other teams
problem
are gonna
with
do that too.
standing pat is that you become predictable. You're gonna have the same offense. You're gonna have the same guys running the same things, and then that's one of the big criticisms that Mike McCarthy had in
Green Bay.
Green Bay. They were running the same plays 10 years into Aaron Rodgers' career that they were in his first couple of years, or whenever McCarthy took over. So the predictability is an enormous problem And if you come back with the exact same roster and the exact same playbook and all that stuff, you start to run into some problems because teams will be able to anticipate and sell out to stop your bread and butter stuff. So you got to evolve quickly and on game day, and you got to be flexible and all of that. And having new and different skill sets on your roster really aids in that, and that means different guys. So while I am a big fan of what the Bills have done this offseason, much like the Kansas City Chiefs did last year, you got to get better.
Yeah. Let's go back to the phones. Brian in Swarmsville joins us. Brian, what do you have for us? You're on One Bills Live.
Well, on a question, I'd like to answer yes, because if you say no, you're conceding that you didn't learn anything to improve on.
Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying, and I don't disagree with you, because I think you always have to strive to get better, and that's not to say that the Bills aren't trying to do that. I think they are. I just think they were very happy with a lot of the people they already had in the fold. I think the tinkering with the roster is going to be less than what we've seen in years past, because on the whole, they like where the roster is, and it's a roster that got them 15 wins last year. But you are still trying to tweak the roster even ever so slightly to try to improve it, where you can get even more contributors than you already have.
Yeah, and I don't know that it's much about changing your roster as much as it is about changing your approach. I think the real question is, do you go out and start acquiring players that you wouldn't have done on the way up to this point because it was a little bit financially irresponsible, or taking a chance on a guy who may or may not be able to help you? And I don't know, Brian, are you still there?
No, we had to let him go because we're up against the break here.
But that's the thing. I mean, the approach, are you tempted by the success you had this last year of doing something special, extra special, or different than what got you here? And I think,
for lack of a better term, taking a shortcut.
Right, and I think that is where, I would draw the line. I think what you're doing is working. And like I said, I've said it 100 times over the last 3 weeks, you just got to play better on that day. Mm-hmm. You've got the guys to win and to beat anybody, but you got to play well on that day.
Break time for us. When we come back, we are going to delve into more of your comments on the tweet sheet about should the success of the Bills in 2020 alter their approach of building a Super Bowl team in 2021. And we're also going to bring you some interesting video from a time when Josh Allen and one Jacob Hollister were previously teammates. We'll show that to you next here on One Bills Live, presented by Kaleida Health. This is Buffalo Bills Radio. Welcome back to One Bills Live. Chris Brown, Steve Tasker with you. And we mentioned that we wanted to, well, I guess we're kind of shedding some light on the prior working relationship between one Josh Allen and one Jacob Hollister, as it's already been communicated when we had Hollister on the show earlier this week after he signed his contract with the Bills. He played with Josh for 2 seasons at the University of Wyoming, along with Tanner Gentry, the wide receiver who is currently on the Bills' offseason roster. He was signed to a reserve futures contract after being on the practice squad in the latter stages of last season. So we came across this out in cyberspace.
Right.
Wanted to share it with you. This is one Jacob Hollister and Josh Allen in a post-game press conference after a Wyoming Cowboys victory. And here they are answering questions from the media in Laramie.
That's what happens when you play a lot of zone on defense. And, they just kind of gave us the opportunities. And, Jake's one of the hardest working guys on the team. He's a captain. And no one deserves this more than him. He's a playmaker, and he busts his butt every day. Couldn't be happier for him. I love this guy right here. I love all my teammates. And, it was our day today.
So there's Josh. Does he sound exactly the same?
He's the same guy.
It's ridiculous.
That is great.
Yeah. So you could see the camaraderie. Our MSG viewers could see the camaraderie. And just to paint the picture for our radio listeners, Jacob's sitting right next to him. Clearly, Josh was asked a question about Jake, who probably made a big play in the game, maybe had the game-winning touchdown, what have you. And, Josh is waxing poetic about his teammate, says he loves the guy, and Jake kind of taps him on the thigh for, giving him so much praise.
Josh is in full Wyoming regalia, pads, jersey, everything, full game gear.
And Josh puts his arm around him at the end. And then obviously they kind of ran into each other after the Bills-Seahawks game last year in Week 9. They took a picture after the game, which we're showing our MSG viewers now. So suffice to say they're tight. I think that's safe, right?
Yeah, and that's hopefully it serves them well on the field. But it was really funny. It popped up on the timeline. I thought, whoa, who's it? And it looked like it could have been yesterday.
Yeah.
And here they are once again playing together. That's kind of cool for the Wyoming people, for their family, all of that stuff. It's really cool. I played with I played with one college, but we're still close friends. John Kidd, the punter for the Bills, was drafted the year before I was, and 2 years later we're playing pro football together. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And same thing with those two.
I got to think it's even more cool for like a non-Power 5 conference school like that. There's only a select few from teams like Wyoming that are going to make it to the NFL and hang around for a while. And for all three to be here in Buffalo right now is pretty wild to think of it that way. We got time to squeeze a phone call in here before we get to the top of the hour. And for that, we go to Tom in West Seneca. Tom, what do you have for us? You're on One Bills Live.
Chris, Steve, thanks for having me. Appreciate it. I really think that because of budget constraints that we have to make some tough decisions, and I have every bit of faith in Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane. They're two of the most brilliant minds in football. You have to make some adjustments, clearly, but they've got to be slight because we're there. We're right there now. We could become a very dominant force in the NFL over the next few years. Like I said, there's tough decisions because of budget constraints, and we're on the right trajectory. That's clear. But they'll make the right choices. And I've got to point out to you, Chris, the other day I had no idea that Coach Carroll, Pete Carroll, was with Buffalo at 84.
That's right. Yeah.
And Steve, I couldn't agree with you more. You were pretty clear on it the other day. The more time you have on the field, the better your team is going to be. But of course, with this COVID-19, it does call for some tough decisions. The question I had was, did the NFL mandate vaccinations yet? And if they do, is it a requirement that each player must be vaccinated? And about Skyview, I took that to mean that they're going to have like maybe a drone. I mean, hell, these drones do everything nowadays. The other day, so
yeah,
it's understood. But
no,
that's all I have to say.
Thanks, Tom.
Being Sean McDermott.
Appreciate you.
Have a great day.
All right, thanks, Tom. Tom basically encapsulated the entire week of shows there in one phone call. That was impressive. His memory's better than mine. I couldn't even remember what we talked about on Monday. My God.
Right. He's right, though. A lot of people have, and Brandon Beane, Sean McDermott have earned the trust of a lot of Bills fans to do this right. I do agree with them. They don't need to overhaul everything and get slightly better and do and make just slight adjustment. That's maybe all the money they have to do that with, and re-signing their own took up all the cap space they needed or had. The one thing about this is too, he's right. They only need slight adjustments, but they also know this. I think Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott have shown the willingness to, if an opportunity to get better pops up, even if it is a little bit,
J.J. Watt,
they'll kick the tires.
Yeah.
If you can get significantly better, even if it means saying goodbye to some guys you really love and respect and are near and dear to you, but if you're going to get better by doing it, you got to think they'll do it. That doesn't mean those opportunities are right and left all the time. I'm just saying they keep their minds open as to what is possible for their team, and I think that is a really good mindset to have, and we've seen them exercise that mindset a ton of times, and I think the way it usually manifests itself, they go out and they who's Darrell Williams? Who's he? He turns out like, wow, look who they found there. That's how it usually is, and that's the better way to do it, I think, finding a guy who all of a sudden hits a home run for your club.
Yeah, and I think if you look at what they have done this offseason, it is a clear indication that they believe they have the people to a vast degree that they need to win the whole damn thing. Proof of that came not only in the fact that they re-signed people like Matt Milano, John Feliciano, and Darrell Williams. They signed all three of them to long-term contracts. 3 years for Feliciano, 3 years for Darrell Williams, 4 years for Matt Milano. I mean, you're not bringing those guys back into the fold. Say, all right, let's just take one more kick at it. Here's a one-year deal. 3 years, 3 years, and 4 years. I mean, if that is not indication that they believe they have the horses to go all the way with who they have already, I don't know what else does.
You're right. Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And those guys, and they're proving, putting their money where their mouth is when they tell their whole team, listen, if you earn it, you're going to get it.
Yeah. Break time for us, but when we return, it is our colleague Maddie Glab joining us. We're going to do a little more of the mock draft watch, along with some other stuff that we have in store. Get set to have some fun with Maddie when we return here on One Bills Live, presented by Kaleida Health. It's Buffalo Bills Radio.
Radio Network. Sports Update.
Your sports update from One Bills Drive. Things slowing down in free agency a bit, but a couple of notable moves this week. The Colts re-signed T.Y. Hilton to a one-year deal worth $10 million. Hilton has 5 1,000-yard seasons on his resume, all with the Colts, of course. Hilton is third on the franchise list in receiving yards as well, behind only Marvin Harrison and Reggie Wayne. Some moves from around the AFC East. The Jets announced they've signed defensive end Vinnie Curry to a one-year deal, formerly of the Eagles. Jets are also finalizing a deal with former Niners running back Tevin Coleman, who is expected to be their starting running back next season. He's the first 49er signing for Jets head coach Robert Saleh, who was previously the Niners defensive coordinator. Patriots are re-signing running back James White, and they're also set to bring back starting defensive tackle Lawrence Guy on a reported 4-year deal. The Miami Dolphins have re-signed linebacker Landon Roberts, who finished 5th on the team last year in tackles and 3rd in tackles for loss, despite playing just 39% of the defensive snaps for the Dolphins last year. Bears agreed to terms on a 1-year deal with former Chiefs running back Damian Williams. The team also signed linebacker Christian Jones. Meanwhile, in hockey, Sabres and Penguins square off for the second game in a row tonight in Pittsburgh. Last night, the Penguins beat the Sabres 5-2. That is your sports update from One Bills Drive. Chris Brown, Steve Tasker here for hour number 2 of the show. And joining us now in the second hour of the program is our own colleague, Maddie Glab, who is here to talk mock draft watch. Steve, are you ready?
It's my favorite part of this whole week.
Maddie, how we doing?
I'm doing good. I'm upset that I don't have a blue striped polo.
Yeah, what the heck?
Really complete the trifecta that you guys have going on.
Got us.
Yeah, she went red today. So
right, now you're not my favorite anymore.
Come on.
It's always fun to have you on because I like poo-pooing mock drafts. The guys, not mock drafts, but the guys that they always tell us we're going to take because I never believe it. And I think there's been because there's always 5,000. So you can always find one who maybe gets a shot in the dark, particularly at number 30, that has a chance of being right? It's hard to do. And, what have you noticed about what have you noticed about how these mock drafts have evolved over the last month?
Oh, well, I can tell you the last 12 that we tracked, which is what went out on Saturday. It was the latest round of the mock draft watch 5.0. So we've done 5 so far. We've tracked 64 mock drafts. And I'm sure this does not come as a shock to any of you, but there were no linebackers mocked to the Buffalo Bills in this last round or this last batch that I've been tracking, of course, because these now have come out after Matt Milano has re-signed with the Buffalo Bills. The running backs also not as much. I've got to say, out of the last 12, 6 corners have been mocked to the Buffalo Bills.
Aha!
1 running back, 3 edge rushers, 2 offensive tackles, and 1 defensive tackle. So this is how we're seeing this all evolve now as the Buffalo Bills have made quite a few free agency moves and re-signing their own. Now, out of the 64, corners now lead the pack. 13 corners have been mocked to the Buffalo Bills with that number 30 pick. 13 offensive tackles, So they're tied 13-13. That's who people think we're going to take as a corner or an offensive tackle. Running backs have been mocked to us 10 times out of the 64 mock drafts that we've tracked. 10 linebackers, 9 edge rushers, 3 defensive tackles, and then the rest kind of falls off from there. So corners and offensive tackles are in the lead right now for what people think that the Buffalo Bills are going to draft at number 30.
Yeah, and how about that, Steve? They're coming around to our way of thinking. You were all about O-line. I was all about cornerback. And
we're way out in front, Brownie.
Drifting that way.
Way out in front.
Drifting that way, at least. Now, Maddie, I know in a previous mock draft watch discussion with you on the show, we did talk about J.C. Horn, the South Carolina cornerback. That guy blew up the workout this week in South Carolina's Pro Day, runs a 4.39, and now people are saying this guy is going to be long gone before the Bills are on the board at 30, which is rather unfortunate. So it looks like we're going to have to look at some other choices here going forward. And I know one that got mocked to the Bills was Greg Newsome from Steve's school, Northwestern.
He's a Northwestern guy. I think this is somebody that we can all get on board with. He's also from Chicago. I'm from Chicago, as I talk about all the time, so I'm a big fan. So this guy is a junior. He went to IMG Academy for his senior year in high school. This is important because IMG Academy is the high school to go to if you want to play at a great college football school. Northwestern is definitely up there with what they've been able to do with their program over the last several years. So this guy did miss part of his freshman and sophomore year due to injury. He's only played in 21 career games in the time that he's been at Northwestern, which is 3 years. So I think he has a little bit more of a high ceiling than some other players who are being mocked to the Bills that might have had 4 years of starting experience. And over the 3 years, he totaled 71 tackles, only 1 interception, but his strength came in pass breakups. He had 25 of them, double-digit pass breakups in the last 2 seasons. And what I think this guy excels at is he's your good, great coverage corner. He seems to be in the right place at the right time, not by chance, but by his athletic ability. I think he probably could have a couple more interceptions with how close he is to some plays, but I think his feet are better than his hands at this point in his career. He's the type of player who comes flying in from nowhere. A lot of the tackles on tape that you've been seeing have came from underneath routes. A lot of the stuff that I watched this morning, I think he does a great job of going stride for stride with receivers. Questions for him, which is going to be the same question for the next corner I'm going to talk about, is your run support. These 2 corners that I'm mentioning, they're a little bit smaller. They're not your stocky guys, although the next corner that I'm going to talk about can also play inside because of his speed. So Greg Newsome is 6 feet. He's 192 pounds. So we're looking at your 6-foot corners. I mean, this is, usually what you get, but he's not a heavier corner per se.
Yeah, I mean, I watched a lot of tape on the guy this week, and what strikes me is he's that long, angular athlete, timed really well on the watch. I mean, he ran a 4.38 at his pro day. But the thing that's crazy is, yes, he times on the watch really fast, but he's not like this sudden, explosive, quick, twitchy guy, which I think is why he's probably going to be in the Bills' range here at 30. And as Maddie said, the run support is the issue. He is not a hitter at all. Like, remember Antoine Winfield was a small guy? That guy could hit people. He could lay it on. And Newsome doesn't do that. He's more of a drag-down tackler. He cuts guys when they're coming at him. He drops the shoulder and cuts him to get him down on the ground rather than, laying the lumber. That's just not who he is.
Yeah, it might be one of the things that pushes him down a little further in the draft as well. But as we've seen, being fast and playing fast are 2 different things. You've got to be able to transfer it. And I think longer guys like this Greg Newsome and like a guy like Richard Sherman, guys who are longer, have to be really efficient in their movements. They can't recover as fast because they don't bend their knees as much and explode back out of the break. They kind of they round it, and even in the pass breakup we were watching here against, I think it was Nebraska in this highlight we've just been watching, he turns his hips and doesn't really get out of his back pedal. And when he puts his foot in the ground, He doesn't really have to move it, but maybe a step and a half to get back to the receiver.
But the explosion's not there.
Yeah, he didn't have to because of the efficiency of his movements, which is what long corners do. So he's got that look about him, that long look about him, and he plays like that. And I think if you can get him and get his technique right and where he has an understanding, no question he could play at this level. But if you're going to play it at this level, you got to be a willing tackler.
Yeah, especially in this system.
Yeah, you've got to be a willing tackler. If you're not, they're going to go to somebody else.
So, Maddie, we've also got the Georgia kid who ran exceptionally well at his pro day. Steve, you remember, I remember you saw it on Twitter when he ran the 4.29. Your eyes almost popped out of your head. But Eric Stokes, Maddie, give us the lowdown on him.
Yeah, so this is a guy that I've seen mocked to the Bills actually in the first and the second round. So his draft stock right now is kind of all over the place. It definitely went up with his 40 time, but this kid is also a junior. He's 6'1", 194 pounds. He's played in 36 career games, so he does have a lot more experience than Newsome. He had 4 interceptions in his career. They all came in 2020. He's broken up 26 passes. He has 3 touchdowns off of interceptions and a touchdown off of a blocked punt, which just speaks to his athleticism as a whole. I think because he's so fast, you have a really quick first step and he can beat receivers to the football. I think that's why he's been able to get 4 interceptions in 2020. But even though he's quick, I like that he doesn't overcommit. I think that's something that's easy to do for defensive players is if you're quick, it's easy to overcommit or to overrun things. He does a good job of not doing that. He's someone who can play outside and in the slot because of his quickness. But just like Newsome, guys, he does not have a lot of punch in him. He doesn't have that, I guess, effort that you would want maybe out of a corner that you get in a bigger corner. He's your long, lanky guy as well, who his strength is his speed, but his weakness is the fact that he doesn't have that punch that you want. He's able to run stride for stride with everyone because of that quickness. Again, a big question for him is his run support. If you're watching tape on him and you're not watching complete games, all you're seeing in his highlight tapes are pass breakups and things like that. You're not seeing him wrap up in the run game. NFL Network rates him as a good backup who could become a starter. I think he looks like he's got the tools, and if he receives the right coaching, he can become a great corner. And with a lot of these skinnier corners, what happens is they go to the NFL and they gain weight in the weight room in muscle. So that's what happened with Levi Wallace we saw over this past year. It might not happen instantly, but I think you can put some strength and some weight on a guy and you can get a little bit more punch in him, a little bit more of that pop that you want to see in a tackler.
Yeah, the only thing that I will say about Stokes that separates him from Newsome in the tackling department is he is a far more willing tackler in terms of meeting a guy face up, putting the crown of his helmet on somebody's chest, and like he is a willing guy that wants to hit. I think sometimes he forgets he's 194 pounds, or maybe he just doesn't care. This is also a guy that routinely for Georgia was matched up on the fastest player that the other team could put on the field at the receiver position. This is a guy who had to cover Henry Ruggs the entire game when he played against Alabama 2 years ago and had a pass breakup in the end zone on a slant route that was impressive. I mean, you have to have elite speed to undercut Henry Ruggs on a slant route in the end zone to break up a pass. That impressed me. And we also saw on this highlight reel him sacking the quarterback on a corner blitz against Tennessee. The ref bit it, and the return also. That guy got sandwiched and absolutely annihilated. But I like Stokes a little bit better than Newsome because I think his game is more complete than Newsome. I might even be inclined to put him ahead of Newsome if you're ranking corners.
Yeah, I think I would too. Because I'll say this too. A guy coming out of the SEC, to me, is more battle-hardened than a guy coming out of the Big Ten when you're talking about throwing the ball and the athleticism with skill position guys you're going to be facing against. Not the Big Ten's a great I played in it. I know it's Michigan, Ohio State. They've got some guys, but when you get down out of that top 2 or 3 or 4 teams, there's just not that many athletes you're going to face like you do at a place with Georgia, like where you got Tennessee and Clemson, or well, not Clemson, but all those teams. So, yeah, I agree with you. I like the competition level that he was at, but both these guys are kind of similar to me. They're long and narrow, and they're fast. And the rest,
and you
I think,
can't coach
the rest,
speed.
I think, yes, you can. But yes, you can. You can coach speed. You can't coach height. You can't make a guy taller, but you can get him faster if he's willing to work at it. The question is, if you're talking about these two guys, this J.C. Horn and Eric Stokes, you start splitting hairs. To me, you start splitting hairs, and that's okay. You take one at 30, you take the next one at 34 or 36, or he gets taken right there. They're both maybe the same guy, headed in the same direction, and it may be where they land that says how the first 4 years of their career is going to go.
All right, let's flip it over to the offensive line here, Matty, because as much to Steve's delight, there are some more offensive linemen being mocked to the Bills of late, and there's one from Michigan that is coming up.
Yeah, so we've got Jalen Mayfield from Michigan. He's an offensive tackle. He's been mocked to the Bills probably 4 times. I want to say I didn't get a chance to count before I went on air, but 3 or 4 times. And he's been mocked from the beginning to this last mock draft watch that we've tracked all these mock drafts, the last 12 that we've tracked. He's been a part of it. So this guy's a 6'5", 320-pound redshirt sophomore. So again, someone who doesn't have that much experience, and even less last year because of COVID and because of a high ankle sprain. He has only appeared in 18 games out of the 3 years that he's been in college football. Out of those 18, he has 15 starts at right tackle. He played a little bit of left tackle too at Michigan. So this is someone who only played in 2 games last year, so not too much experience last season. The 2 games that he did play in, he did a great job at that right tackle position from what I read this morning. But NFL Network grades him as someone who could become a starter, but is more likely to be a backup in his first couple seasons in the NFL. I think he has pretty good fundamentals. His first few steps are always the right steps from what I was watching in his pass blocking and run blocking. It seems like his strength is definitely in the run blocking game. He's able to get to the second level of the field pretty easily, and he gives the quarterback enough time and enough room to make some plays. And he also looks pretty good in space. So I think this is someone who has a lot of upside because he has so little experience in college football. He had 13 starts in his second year and redshirted his first year. So he played in 3 games his first year, 13 games his second year, and then 2 games this past season. So I think more upside than anything. If he gets a good coach who can help him, I think this is somebody who you probably want on your team just based off what he's been able to show in so little time.
Yeah. I mean, injuries kind of cut into his time on the field in his sophomore year, in his junior year. And there are some that think he might project inside to guard as well. This is where the scouts come in with the arm length stuff and the footwork stuff, and they say, 15 years ago, Steve, you could put a guy that didn't have elite feet at right tackle and be okay. Now you have to have 2 good athletes at left and right tackle, and if a guy shows that maybe he doesn't have top-flight feet, they move him inside and say, let's just put him at guard. He'll be much more successful there, where if he's playing at right tackle in the NFL, he may be hanging on by a thread every week.
Right, and Maddie's right. When you say about his upside, these guys are coming out, like as you say, he's a redshirt junior, redshirt sophomore, has only got 18 games. He's been in the building there at Michigan for, 3 years now?
Yeah.
But he didn't play much last year, 2 games, so because of COVID. The reason these guys are intriguing is because you get to a point where when they start to learn, they get into the pro environment, and they see everybody there trying to get better and working hard and getting and learning some techniques. They have a long way they could go, and most of, if not all of, what transforms one of these guys on this list we're looking at offensive line prospects here on MSG, or if you're listening on your radio, one of the biggest difference maker for these players we're talking about, all these prospects, is what's inside their head. If they make a decision and they get in a mindset where they're not going to be denied and they have a quest that they're going to get on the field and they're going to start and they're going to get to a Pro Bowl or get to the All-Pro or they're going to be a legendary player, when they get that ingrained inside them, it can happen. Mm-hmm. Even for guys who don't check all the physical boxes that the guys on these lists do. It could happen for anybody. So Maddie's right. In some ways, the younger these guys are coming out, the bigger high end they have. But the harder road it is because, as I told you,
there's more ground to cover.
Yeah, it's more ground to cover. And when you walk into an NFL locker room as a young kid, it's intimidating, and it can crush your soul if you're not successful or if you just can't make it. And that that organization that drafts you just isn't patient enough. And then because of an injury, you lose a year, and then you go to another building, another team, and they lose patience with you or don't have the time for you. And that's what happens. So it's all about where you go and get drafted, and can they be patient enough to help you get to your high end. And for the Bills, that's what they're all about. But the Bills right now, at this point in history, aren't quite where they're willing to say, hey, even if the guy's not that good, he's still good enough for our team. It's not that way anymore. You got to be good to get on this team. So it's a double-edged sword. Do you take one of these kids with fantastic potential in the high end, or do you take a guy who may be able to help you a little quicker? That's a big question.
Right. And we know, Matty, that the Bills love position flexibility. So maybe they are interested in a guy like this who has tackle experience but could transition to guard, and in a pinch, if you need him at tackle, maybe he can help you there as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I also think, it's going to differ position by position on if they want to invest in someone who has more upside that might take a couple years to come on, rather than drafting someone at number 30 who could be your third or fourth string player that does see snaps in every game or in every few games based on availability. We do know this offensive line loves position flexibility, and they showed that last season with injuries. I hope that's not the case this year. But we know in training camp, they're going to rep guys all over the place, and they're going to figure out who that starting five is. I'm sure we can guess who it's going to be. But when injuries happen, it was so nice to see our offensive line shift and not miss a beat. And because of that, Josh Allen was able to go out there and do his best, and we were able to win games. I mean, if you throw John Feliciano out at center and he sucks at it, which he completely didn't, that's a different story. And so I think position flexibility, especially for offensive line, is something that's super important that these guys do have in college. Most of these offensive linemen that we're looking at now, more often than not, at least the guys that have been mocked to the Bills, it's like, yes, they played tackle, or yes, they played offensive guard, but they did play snaps at another position, or we could see them moving across the offensive line. I mean, look at Cody Ford and what he's been able to do. Whether he finds a home at one position or not, he's still been a great offensive lineman for the Buffalo Bills. I know he had those injuries, but hopefully this upcoming season, we really see him in a solidified role, whether that's at one position or shifting between two.
Well, we know the Bills still need a swing tackle, and they still need some depth at guard. So offensive linemen are guys to keep an eye on as far as the draft class goes, unless the Bills do something in free agency between now and then. Matty, as always, thanks for the time. Thanks for breaking down the latest prospects on the Mock Draft Watch. We'll keep an eye on those every Saturday on BuffaloBills.com. Appreciate the time.
Thanks, Matty.
Yeah, of course. I'll bring my polo next time. That's blue and striped.
Yeah, we'll try to get you on the Bill's swag department there. We're a little slow here during the pandemic. We gotta revitalize the wardrobe. Steve and I certainly do. Look at us. We look ridiculous today. Thanks, Maddie.
Same here. Thanks, guys.
All right, that's Maddie Glab, our colleague, helping us out here, and putting those mock draft watches up every Saturday, which we know are very popular among our fans because they're curious. They're like, hey, what are people thinking about us at 30? And Maddie kind of collects them all into one spot. and then we just put them up every Saturday on BuffaloBills.com for everybody to chew on.
I'm gonna have to ask her if she can kind of compile that one name that's been mocked to the Bills more than any other name.
Well, she's done that. I think she did the breakdown for us the last time we had her on.
Right.
She's like, oh, this guy was named 7 times. This guy was named. She's got a whole
this kid,
database
the
running.
tackle from Notre Dame, Liam Eichenberg.
Oh, yeah.
Eichenberg has been tagged on the Bills a bunch of times. Big 6'8" tackle out of Notre Dame. And this the guy we were just talking about a moment ago, Jalen Mayfield, tackle out of Michigan, same kind of thing.
There are a lot of people that think he's a guard in the NFL. They think he could survive at tackle, but they think he could excel at guard. And we've seen this debate before, even with Bills picks. Cody Glenn. Cody Ford. I mean, remember when Cody Glenn got drafted by Buddy Nix? They're like, oh, he's a guard. He played left tackle here. Mm-hmm. You know? Same thing with Cody Ford. He's best at guard. He played right tackle here his rookie year.
Mm-hmm.
So, Jalen Mayfield's a guy that a lot of people are projecting to guard, but there are teams out there that probably say, no, he can play tackle in the league.
Yeah, it's impossible for NFL scouts. I mean, they can see these guys on film. They can go to practice and watch them play. They can sit down and look them in the eye and talk to them for an hour, 2 hours, or whatever. Spend a weekend in the college town getting to know the guy, talking to people about him. You can't scout how becoming a professional athlete changes a kid. Because it does. That whatever environment it is, particularly you don't know how it's going to be different, and this is the ultimate. How do you know that Sam Darnold wouldn't have been a completely different quarterback or had much different success rate if he had been drafted by Jacksonville, Miami, Houston, Buffalo, you name it? It's a completely different organization, completely different teammates, completely different coaching. How would that have changed a guy's, arc of his career? And but it is something every kid has to deal with. So you're taking an unbelievably complex individual who's different from every other kid in his draft class at the same position. He's completely different, and you're putting him on some NFL team. You're projecting him on an NFL team that is different than the other 31 NFL teams, and you're mixing the two together, trying to find which combination would have the most success. Forget it. It's a crapshoot, and that's why mock drafts and all that, it's so fun to think about. But, man, we don't even know who these guys are.
Wow. Even the best scouts in the league don't know definitively who they are. Right. And the team at large, after they get them in the building, won't know who they are until they put them on the field.
There's been a lot said.
That's when you know when you know.
And, and you know what? The unbelievable part of it is there are coaches – that'll come tell you, I knew 20 minutes into his career when we got him finally out. I knew which
on
guy
the
could
field,
play.
Though, is when you know. That's when you know.
When you start coaching them and talking to them is when you know. And there's been a lot of articles coming out of Jacksonville. Urban Meyer, who came from the highest ranks of the college level, and this free agency round that we're in, he's like, this is nuts.
Yeah,
I'm offering these guys wads of cash. I've never even met them.
Yeah.
He goes, that's not how I want to do business. Welcome.
Well, you better get used to it.
Welcome.
Break time for us. Steve and I will talk a little bit more about draft prospects, but we'll also get back to our conversation about the Bills' approach to building a Super Bowl winner and if their success from last year should alter the plan, even ever so slightly, to get into full-blown go-for-it mode. We'll talk to you about that when we return here on One Bills Live, presented by Kaleida Health. It's Buffalo Bills Radio. Welcome back to One Bills Live. Chris Brown, Steve Tasker with you, talking about the success of the Bills in 2020 and whether or not it should alter their approach of building a Super Bowl team here in 2021. Obviously, the signings that they have made to this point, the longest commitments being those of their own players that they re-signed to the roster, with the exception of Levi Wallace and Isaiah McKenzie, who signed one-year deals. They made long-term commitments to the likes of Darrell Williams, John Feliciano, and of Matt Milano. Is that an indication to you that they think they can win with the group as it's currently constituted? Naturally, they've made some small tweaks. Emmanuel Sanders on the roster, among others, Jacob Hollister, etc. But the vast majority of this roster remains intact, which I think is a signal that they think they can go all the way with the majority of the group they already had on board. But we want to know if you think that the means by which they have gotten to this point should slightly change to get them over the hump and to a Super Bowl title. And more than 60% of you are saying, no, don't, leave it alone. Don't do anything. But there's a respectable percentage there, Steve, 40%, saying, yeah, you got to tweak it a little bit. You got to go for it. Take on a little more risk.
There's a little impatience in there, yeah.
It's hard to do that in a restrictive cap year. I wonder if the cap was what it normally was, if Brandon Beane would have been a little bit more open to just a wee bit more risk-taking. If he thought it meant getting over that hump.
They might have been able to entice and gone out and gotten the right kind of guys. I mean, maybe they've already got a guy like Richard Sherman in the fold if they do that. Maybe they've already got a guy like I've been talking about him all day, Alejandro Villanueva, the tackle from Pittsburgh. Guys like that are special. And like I've been saying, they're special from the neck up as much as they are physical, players. You got to get your young players around guys like that. So if the cap was in the right spot, maybe the Bills are able to entice those guys. But then again, those guys probably wouldn't be available anyway.
That's a good point.
So
but the Steelers are in a tough cap situation, so it's not like they can compete to get him back.
Right. Villanueva you might be able to get. Richard Sherman, maybe.
And I don't know that Villanueva at his advanced age is starting material anymore anyway, so that might be the perfect guy to be your swing tackle.
Yeah, don't need him
forward.
to be. He can be Ty Nsekhe from last year. Just maybe
exactly
15 total snaps on the season, but when he's in there, you get stellar play. Perfect. Villanueva would be perfect. A guy that has, the voice in the room. He's sitting in the back of the room, in the offensive line room, but he's got a wealth of wisdom that's saying, hey, listen, wait a minute, think about this and this and this. So a wealth of experience and a wealth of leadership qualities to get in that room. So, it's guys like that. So if it was a normal cap year, no. If the Bills had cap space, had just happened to be one of those years where they have cap space, even in a down year like this, and they could shop freely, you might have seen a little bit. I don't think they would have, gone off the
rails.
Gone off the rails. But maybe.
From Nick on the tweet sheet, I actually think the success of the Super Bowl teams should alter our approach. So here's a guy in the 40%. The Chiefs dominated our line with their front four. Then the Bucs dominated the Chiefs with their front four. Improving our D-line is the answer for making it to the Super Bowl. The problem is, on the free agent market, that usually costs you a boatload of money if you're looking to make demonstrative improvements.
Both a boatload of money and a boatload of draft picks. It's hard to develop a defensive line where you got four guys that can get home quick to the quarterback, rushing only four. It's the magic elixir. I've said it a ton of times. It's a magic elixir. You got four guys that can rush the passer and get there really fast, all your problems are solved. Your problems are absolutely solved. Mm-hmm. That's why so few teams are able to do it. And don't kid yourself. The reason the Bucs dominated the Chiefs was because the Chiefs lost both their tackles. You don't come back from that against a team that's good enough to be in the Super Bowl. You're done. So, and Pat Mahomes was, Pat Mahomes, as magical as he is, couldn't overcome.
Yeah, what was that number? They said he scrambled for over 270-something yards.
No, it was 400 yards.
Over 400 yards scrambling around in the game.
He ran like 400 or 500 yards away from those guys, trying to find a way. And you got pictures of him laying, he's 2 feet off the ground, parallel to the ground, sidearming one out of there.
Which should have been a touchdown, by the way.
And he was
not for nothing.
And he's making throws like that, and they're going boinking off the face mask of his receivers. The guy's unbelievable. And the health of his offensive line, betrayed their entire cause.
From Jack on the tweet sheet, no. Trust the process and continue to build around Allen. Add weapons and protection. Continue to cultivate depth so the team can truly have a next-man-up mentality if guys leave, get hurt, to sustain success. They do need to add some younger talent on D, but I believe that has always been their plan. Yeah, I'm in favor of the youth movement at corner because you have veterans on this roster now. including Taron Johnson, who's entering the last year of his contract. So, yeah, there has to be an influx of youth at corner. The depth behind Matt Milano and Tremaine Edmonds is pretty young already when you think about it. You're thinking of your Tyrell Dodsons, your Phillips. What's Phillips? Delshon Phillips.
Delshon Phillips, yeah.
Young players already. So I don't know that you need to get any younger there. But D-line, the youth is in A.J. Epinesa, Ed Oliver, and Darryl Johnson. Harrison Phillips, I guess, is on his rookie contract, so still young player. Everybody else is a little longer in the tooth.
This will be the last year of Harrison Phillips' contract, correct?
Yes. And it's also the last year of Jerry Hughes' contract. So there's that at work there. So it's funny because you hear all of these Bills fans saying, no, don't alter your approach. But then they say, well, we got to trust we got to keep building around Allen. We got to add these weapons for protection. Got to cultivate the depth. It's like, well, that's more than they've done already. So are you altering your approach by asking for all that?
I don't think so. I don't think it's altering the approach. I think they just haven't been as successful as they wanted to be in that approach. They needed to hit. They needed Ed Oliver to play better, A.J. Epinesa to play better, and contribute more earlier in their careers. They needed Trent Murphy to be better on his contract. Vernon Butler, Mario Addison, and then losing Starlo Tulele, opting out. Not being able to find a guy who could step in and dominate at a corner opposite Tre'Davious White in Josh Norman or Kevin Johnson, E.J. Gaines. None of those guys could get it done. So say what you want. The plan has been good. And just like I say, the players need to play better on the day they play those good teams. On the Chiefs in the championship game, you got to play your best. They did not. They also got to do better in picking the guys that are going to develop either faster or better or at a higher level than guys they have, or these guys have got to start doing it a little better too. So it's, the philosophy and the process stays the same, but everybody's got to do their job a little better, just the players, coaches, scouts, everybody.
We'll take a break, come back with more on that, and don't forget, in about 15 minutes, we'll be talking with former NFL front office executive Scott Pioli about some of the dealings going on around the league and his take on some of the Bills' decisions in free agency. It's all coming up soon here on One Bills Live, presented by Kaleida Health. It's Buffalo Bills Radio. Bills Live, Chris Brown, Steve Tasker going right back to the phones as we're asking you if the Bills should tweak their approach in building a Super Bowl team for 2021 based on their success from 2020. We go to the phones, and leading us off here is Zach in Buffalo. Zach, what do you have for us here on One Bills Live?
Hey, guys, what's up? First off, shout out Bills Mafia, shout out Matty Glab, favorite part of the segment, but this is what I got for you guys. I think right now our team is ready to go to the Super Bowl. I think they've done an awesome job. I think Bean should repeat as exec of the year. We got everything filled, and what it sounds like to me is at the end of the first round, there's not a starter that's going to be available for us. There's a big question marks about these corners and tackles. I mean, our offensive line is ready to go already. But what do you think the odds are of us packaging some picks, going up in the draft to either get a corner? I know Steve doesn't like running backs, but maybe Najee Harris or maybe even Kyle Pitts. I think one year, I don't know if it was the Bengals that moved up to get A.J. Green or Atlanta that moved up to get Julio Jones. They kind of did like something crazy to get from the bottom to the top. I just want to know what you think about that and what would Steve do with this team. Thanks for taking my call, guys.
All right, Zach. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, it's a lot in there, but yeah, I'll tell you this: you're not going to have to move up in the draft at all to get either Najee Harris or Etienne from Clemson. You can get either one of those guys. You might be able to get either one of those guys at 64. You don't have to move up in the draft to get one of those guys. Nobody is in my opinion, nobody's going to take Najee Harris or Travis. Is that right, Travis?
Travis Etienne.
Travis Etienne in the first round. Neither one of those guys are like a Saquon Barkley type of guy. And even Saquon Barkley, I don't know. Anyway, that's my point. No, you're not moving up to take that. Now, positionally, you're right. I've heard draft people say that this draft goes about 20 deep to get starters. I don't know that I want to package all it would take to get up inside the top 20 to get a player at any position that would start for this team.
You got to move up 10 spots just to get to 20 this year,
right? For
the Bills,
it's a long way, and it might cost you a 4, 5, and 6, or 2, 3, and 4. I wouldn't do it. It would take a lot to get up inside the top 20 of the NFL draft, and I'm not ready to do that. I don't know exactly what it would be, but it seems to me it would be a ton, and I don't want to pay that. You're right. The team is very close, and what I would do is continue to sign guys. I would pick up the phone. I'd find out what Richard Sherman's asking, and I'd try to find out what Villanueva's asking, the tackle from Pittsburgh, and guys like that to fill out my roster before the draft. Because if you could get if you get another offensive line of that caliber, you don't have to draft anybody at that spot, which is amazing compared to where we were 3 weeks ago. And you may be able to take a corner. In this draft, I've heard there are a lot of corners that are going to be very good. We've been talking about a couple of them today. Yeah, I could see him doing that and taking a corner who could be plugged in and play for this squad. That's about it. Other than that, you're right. I'm with you. This team is very close. I think all they need to do is focus on themselves now in this roster and getting them to play their best every week, because if you do that, they're going to win a ton of games, and they got a chance to get back to right where they were this last January with a chance to go even further.
Yeah. I don't see a monumental move up the board. It's going to cost too much. I could see a move up from like 30 to 25, 24 if they feel somebody's sliding that shouldn't be. But that giant move up the board like the Falcons did with Julio Jones going all the way up to number 6, I don't know. That's going to take a lot, and I can't see Brandon being parting with that kind of draft.
What position would cost?
Well, Kyle Pitts is the best tight end in generation. He's going to go in the top 5.
I've heard that before.
Yeah. We'll take a break, but coming up next, former NFL front office executive Scott Pioli, former GM of the Chiefs, former personnel executive of the Patriots, joins us next here on One Bills Live, presented by Kaleida Health. It's Buffalo Bills Radio.
And it's Steve Tasker who has been all over the field.
Kind of unique. He was kind of a dual-role player for you.
Steve!
A balloon.
Steve! A blimp? We're not even in the stratosphere of normalcy. It is hour number 3 of One Bills Live. Chris Brown, Steve Tasker with you. And joining us on the line right now, he's currently an NFL Network analyst, but was former personnel executive for the New England Patriots, former GM of the Chiefs. He is one Scott Pioli joining us on the line to talk a little NFL free agency, kind of comment on some of these Bills moves, and in what is a crazy restrictive salary cap offseason. You're probably pretty happy, Scott. You didn't have to operate with the salary cap going down, although during the lockout, I believe you had to deal with that, right?
Yeah, but we knew it was coming. We weren't surprised like everyone is now. That year that there was the player lockout, and we knew the cap was good. Everyone knew what was about to happen, so you were able to prepare for it. This was one of those things, I'm happy I'm not having to deal with not only the salary cap, but with the COVID protocols and all of there's so many difficult outside factors right now for people running clubs. It's a handful right now.
What was the hardest part about that last offseason, do you think, for these clubs? Was it preparing for COVID protocols and getting these guys tested every day and actually getting physically in the building? Was it scouting a draft class so you couldn't go to the campuses?
Yeah.
Or was it this last fall when a lot of teams just didn't even play? I mean, what's been the most unbelievable adjustment?
Steve, I think to me the draft part was kind of easy, as silly as that may sound, because the bottom line is, I'm a tape guy, right? I was always about the tape. I love the idea of 40s and heights and weights and speeds and short cone short shuttle and 3 cone. I love that stuff. I respect it for what it is. But to me, watching that process was to me that I think was the least difficult. To me, I think the most difficult thing is just the day-to-day unknown. Talking with so many people with clubs, they were waking up so early every morning and getting these morning calls. I mean, football is an early morning business to begin with, but I think it was the day-to-day unknown and the anxiety that it created, not only in the workplace, but the confluence of the unknown of a workplace and the unknown for your family. To me, that had to be the most difficult part in talking with people and trying to put myself in their shoes. As you know, there's nothing we hate more in any business when you're a leader is surprises.
Right.
So, Scott, you look at the Bills, and they chose to take the approach to a large degree of just re-signing their own. And I thought it was rather interesting that the biggest contracts in terms of length were handed to their own players as well. Milano gets a 4-year deal, Darrell Williams gets a 3-year deal, and John Feliciano gets a 3-year deal. Do you take that as an indication of this front office saying, we can win with the guys that we have. We're good enough to get back to where we were last year. We only need to make minor tweaks to this roster?
I love what they did, because to me, I don't see that as a form of arrogance at all. And I think sometimes people on the outside will look at teams that do that and say, oh, they think they got it all figured out. No, the Bills are a developmental program. They bring people in and they develop them. And when you get good players that you see that are ascending, that can play in your system and play in your culture, right? Not every player fits every single culture. Very often the mistakes that are made in free agency is when players play well in one place, they come into another system, and the system is different, but so is the culture. So the players don't always react the same way. That's not the player's fault. It's not the team's fault. It's just not the right match. And I am a big believer that signing your own players is the most important part of free agency. I know how, in the outside world, the public and fans and the media want to see this big splash. Oh, go sign this guy from over there. I'm not a believer in having to do that unless you have to do that. And to me, when you have good players that have played well in your system and they deserve to be rewarded, I again, long-winded way of saying I love what they did. They have good football players that they're developing. They did some very, very smart business. Again, the other part that I'll say is no one should know your players better than you. And if you know your players well, you will make far less mistakes in free agent signings and spending your money to be a good football team.
And in the current day and age of the NFL, there is going to be a certain number of your players every year that you have to sign off the free agent wire. How do you scout a pro player differently than a college player?
Well, I think you get to see them in the real NFL environment. Again, my background, even though I did some college scouting, but my primary space was, watching guys like you, Steve, and you wore me out when I was working with teams we had to play. I was a pro personnel guy. So to me, the biggest difference is you're seeing them in an environment that you know what their performance level is. You're seeing them play against teams that you know. So not only are you able to evaluate the player that you are evaluating, but you know exactly what and who the competition is that they're facing to make that judgment based on their ability the best. So to me, there's so many more knowns. I think you also end up in a situation when you're dealing with free agent players, you have players that are outside of that college environment and some of the behavioral stuff. And if there's behavioral stuff that you have to pay attention to, it's usually very much out there in the 32 NFL cities. I guess LA counts as one and New York counts as one, but there's information that's out there that's much easier to find.
Talking to NFL Network analyst Scott Pioli. And in that vein, Scott, I know you said that, scouting college players really isn't that much more difficult amidst this pandemic, but I kind of hearken back to a comment that I remember former Bills GM Buddy Nick saying, and granted, he's an old-school scout who did it in an old-school way, but he said, I like to be able to smell the guy's breath. He wants the face-to-face interaction to really get a feel for who the person is, not just who the player is. So that's been somewhat compromised. I know there was access at the Senior Bowl, when guys are going to pro days to get some face-to-face time. But what about that aspect of it? Because the Bills are very stringent on making sure the player has what they call their Bills DNA. the guy that they know what they're going to get out of him in Week 17 on a Thursday practice as they will on the first day of training camp. How do you find that and get enough of that information in an atmosphere that they're dealing with now?
Well, first of all, I want to say this. Buddy Nix was one heck of a scout, and I understand exactly what he was saying when he said that. Some of the scouts and directors and personnel evaluators that came out of Buffalo through those many years under Bill Polian, I mean, what a tremendous group of NFL evaluators. I am a firm believer in that whole idea and being able to see them on campus, be in person, get a feel for their personality more than just that 15-minute interview that, even at the combine in times when we're not in a pandemic, sometimes you can be fooled, right? You want to see people's body language. You want to see, because this game is a chemistry experiment, and the interdependent relationships and how people mesh together and how they don't mesh together is a critical part. And you need to see human behavior in order to do that. I think it is tough doing that this year. That's why I think the teams that either have coaches, for instance, Matt Rule, who's been in college and been around a lot of these guys, recruited some of these guys. He has some background info on them. Guys like Urban Meyer and his connections in the college game are really going to help. It's going to help those individuals. But to me, the teams that will have the greatest success in terms of getting the right, you call Bill's DNA guy. To me, I've always referred to it as makeup, right? The individual's makeup and who they are and what they are. And getting the makeup right is going to be difficult this year. But if you have a good scouting staff and a good coaching staff that have relationships that they can really trust the truth and know that they're going to get the truth, that's going to be a key component in circumstances just like this.
Scott, last question I've got for you. We just heard that the NFL is setting out, more relaxed protocols for draft day. It looks like teams are going to have war rooms again this year where they were all spread out all over creation last year for the draft. It's going to be more in-house. What has been your experience with the different organizations you have worked with, New England Patriots, the Kansas City Chiefs, Atlanta Falcons? How did those war rooms vary in your experience, and what do you feel is the most important, as to who has a voice and who, when we hear the guy jump up on the table for a guy, how does that work?
Yeah, so most of my football life was spent in very controlled environments in draft rooms, with the Browns under Belichick, and then I had a year in Baltimore where Ozzie ran it that year with Coach March Broda, and then with Parcells, and then Bill and I being together all those years at the Patriots, and then had my own. And then, the Falcons was probably the one that was a little bit different. There were far more people in there. The model that I was used to and spent most of my time in, the thought was always that less was more. Not less opinions, but less people in that room, because there were fewer distractions and you had the ability to focus, which is why I think as a team, we spent so much time always on top of trades, trading up, trading back, always looking for moments, because there were no distractions. There were no conversations other than straight business. The Falcons drafting was a little bit different, where they had more people in there, but I don't think that was necessarily a Falcons thing as much as it has become an evolution of what the game is and the entertainment component that seems so important to owners across the league. And so to me, I was always, I'm not a smart guy, so I need fewer distractions. And the people that I worked with, even the smart people, we all worked much better with fewer distractions. The jumping up on the table for players needed to happen the weeks before, because the evaluation process and the opinions should be done well before the draft. When draft day starts, it's all about strategy and picking players. If you're having conversations about evaluations on draft day as you're getting ready to make a pick, you might be in a little bit of trouble, guys.
Gotcha.
All right, Scott, as always, thanks for the insight. We appreciate it. We know your time is short. We're going to let you go here. Look forward to talking to you sometime before the draft again.
Thanks, Scott.
Take care.
Appreciate you.
Thank you, guys. Really appreciate it.
All right, that's NFL Network analyst Scott Pioli, former front office executive for 3 or 4 clubs. And, yeah, he is right, 100%.
If you're going to jump up on a table for it, it's too late.
Yeah. You're doing that in December at the end of the fall scouting season. And if you're still adamant about somebody that you don't think is getting graded high enough, you do it at the end of February after you come back from the combine, and that's about it. Your chances are over after that.
Yeah, and it makes a lot of sense. You got to have that stuff all planned out. And he's right. the draft, you've seen it. How complicated must it be where there's 32 voices in the conversation, meaning 32 GMs, 32 presidents, what have you, whoever's speaking for the team that a GM's got to call.
Yeah.
How difficult it must be to sort through all the permutations of what could possibly happen, particularly when the unpredictability happens after you get out of that first 10 picks, right? And even sometimes into the first 10 picks about the unpredictability about who's going to trade who.
Yeah.
And then to be nimble enough mentally and organizationally to say, hey, this scenario is happening. We've got an opportunity now to jump up, jump back, or make this offer, or take that offer, or call them up. They offered us this 2 weeks ago. Let's call them back. Is that still on the, that kind of thing. Huge amount of moving parts that you got to keep track of.
I've had the privilege of being in the Bills draft room a handful of times over the years, and I think people would be surprised at how calm, cool, and collected it is in there, because all the hay is in the barn.
Right.
And it's just a matter of executing, as Scott said, your strategy. The only time it gets busy is after the draft is over.
Right.
And you're scrambling to get the undrafted guys. That is like Wall Street and the stock market floor.
Yes.
Like, it's guys like on this phone, handing a phone to a coach to convince this undrafted guy to sign with you. And like, oh, can we give him more bonus money? Can we not? Like, it is Keystone Cops when you get to the undrafted portion of the draft. That's the most exciting thing that happened in the room over the 3 days.
I did not experience that as a player. I was drafted late in the draft, like in the 9th round, 226 out of 250 plus that are drafted. I was 226 overall, so I didn't go through that. My son did.
Yeah.
Where there was a chance he would get drafted, just like me, get drafted late, or we're going to call you about signing as a free agent. His phone was, and his agent, his phone, and it was pretty hectic for about an hour right after.
It's hectic on the other end in the team rooms too,
and it happened within an hour after the draft was over. Within an hour, so it was pretty. You could just get the feel that it was like that from our end, let alone the club's end.
Yeah, you're one player in one house.
Right.
Like in a team draft room.
In one position.
In a team draft room, there are guys that are paired off and teamed up. Like, this coach, go with this scout. This coach, you go with this scout. You work tight ends. You work this, you know what I mean? Yep. And they have it up on the board. Because after the draft, they know, okay, we still need 3 tight ends, 3 O-linemen, 2 corners, a safety, and a punter.
Right.
And as they get it, all right, we got this guy. Oh, knock that list down. We only need 2 corners now. Like, it's just, it's going. It's so fluid, it would blow your mind.
It's amazing. And and I'll tell you, if you're good enough physically and all that, it's almost better in sometimes not to get drafted that late, but to go as a free agent, because then you can, when you get 2 calls or 3 calls, you can say, no, that team would be better for me. Mm-hmm. Much better for me, either for personal reasons or professional reasons.
Sometimes an agent will try to play one against another to get a little more bonus money for his guy who didn't go get drafted and is all upset. And sometimes that's a dangerous game to play too.
Yeah, but you're also the players with a player's who's on the ball enough or willing enough to have an agent. That agent's usually smart enough to prepare him for that. Listen, you may not go.
Yeah.
You got to be ready for that. And here's what our plan is going to be.
And the smart agent puts him in a situation where he's got the best chance to make a roster.
That's right.
Don't go where the best bonus money is either.
That's exactly right.
We want to get back to the phones as we're talking about whether the success of the Bills in 2020 should alter their approach even ever so slightly to build a Super Bowl team here in 2021. Got some people waiting patiently, so we want to get to them. We go to Jesse in Buffalo. Jesse, what do you have for us? You're on One Bills Live. Hello, Jesse. I'm going to put Jesse.
Steve, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. What do you got for us?
Hey, how you guys doing? Hey, it's a few things that have been bothering me for a while. So Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott had some comments a few weeks ago that spoke into McDermott saying, there was a speed difference between us and the Chiefs. And then Brandon Beane also added that we're looking for an elite tight end. Now, we didn't get that in the free agency. And the team right now was built to take a risk. And I know you guys don't really agree with moving up in the draft. And with Kyle Pitts, if he was to slide back just enough, and we all know Brandon Beane likes to move up as far other than moving back, do you think he'll move up to 6, between 6 and 10, to go for Kyle Pitts?
I think that's too much. You'd almost trade your last 5 picks to get up there, and maybe a pick next year.
You may have to trade a future one to get up that high.
Right.
From
exactly.
30. I mean, if you're sitting at 15, that's one thing, Jesse. But you're at 30. You got a long way to go.
It might take you
to get up there. And I'm telling you right now, Kyle Pitts is. The only thing that's going to knock him out of the top 5, or if the top 4 teams take quarterbacks. That's the only. I mean, he is that special. And believe me, I'd love to have him on this Bills roster. But man, that is a long way to go to get that kid. And I think he's going to be special. So you say, well, why not take a swing? But man, you got to do a lot. You got to do a lot to get up there.
Yeah, the only way that happens is if something happens, like he is in a car wreck and got a busted leg, and everybody backs off him.
Yeah.
And then you grab him, and 6 weeks later he's 100%. You know what I mean? That means that's not going to – you can't – I'm not saying you can't. To jump up inside the top 10 from the 30th pick takes a lot more than just switching ones and giving them a 2. It would be like this year's 1, next year's 1, this year's 2, next year's 2 kind of thing.
I mean, just to give you an idea in terms of draft capital, pick 5 has a old school draft value of $1,700, and the Bills pick at 30 has a value of $620. So you need like the equivalent of 3 of Buffalo's picks at 30 to get up there. So you essentially would have to give up your whole draft this year and probably something next year to get from 30 to 5. And that's where I think you have to be in a safe range to get Pitts, quite frankly. So, look, I want to know. Now, I should tell you that you may have misquoted Brandon Beane a little bit. He didn't say, I want an elite tight end. He said, we want to take a look at the tight end position because it had an up-and-down year last year. Now, that's not to say he wouldn't take Kyle Pitts. He'd take him in the blink of an eye because he's that good. But, man, you got to do a lot to get up there.
You'd have to give up 2 1s plus
maybe a starter on your roster.
Yeah, or 2 1s and maybe and a 4. 2 1s and a 4 to do it.
It's a long way to go.
Yeah, it is a very long way to go.
Let's get back to the phones. We go to Tom in Lackawanna. Tom, what do you have for us? You're on One Bills Live.
Steve.
Yes.
Steve. Drafting away would be in the exact same stratosphere as drafting Aaron Maben. Biggest we ever had.
Yeah, I know, Tom. I share your concern because
Tom, you are echoing the conversation we had right after we got off that
segment.
That Owe talk. So, yeah, I get you. Go ahead.
You know, to me, Maben was, the guy only played 1 year.
Yep.
Got no sacks. Okay, he can run faster than Flash, but so could Maben, except he couldn't do anything else.
Yep.
And I can't see wasting the 30th pick. That just doesn't make sense with building forward. They need to get, and plus McDermott and Bean like guys who play 3-4 years, not 1 year.
Yep.
So, and that promo with Steve, that's got to go, guys. Every start of the hour, it gets annoying.
All right, we'll take it under advisement, Tom.
All right,
Thank you.
We'll try and come up with another rope. We'll get our crack staff.
We can update that. I don't mind updating that.
Yeah, we can update it.
I'm tired of talking about a blimp. I'll admit it.
All right.
All
right. Thanks for listening, though, Tom. Appreciate you hearing that every hour.
I understand why Tom he shares some of the same scars that I do because the Bills in 2009, what was it, the 11th pick, I believe, they chose Aaron Maben from Penn State, who was a redshirt sophomore, who only was a 1-year starter and didn't have a large body of work. Now here's Jason Owe, redshirt sophomore, plays the same position, 1-year starter, doesn't have a large body of production, no sacks this year. Picking at 30 is different than picking at 11. And I will say this, Aaron Maben's 40 time was 4.78. It wasn't 4.39. A little bit of a difference there.
There is a difference there. And Aaron Maben didn't weigh 260 pounds.
No.
He weighed like 215, 220. I mean, you look back on it, it's easy to say that, but, oh, my gosh, what were they thinking?
They picked Eric Wood at 28. Guy was a 10-year player for them.
And there, MSG watchers are looking at Jason Owe running his 40 right now.
He is all over the place.
He's like running like he's fighting it, right?
And he still ran 4.39. 4.39. Dear Lord.
The guy's, how tall is he?
He's 6'5", $258.
That's no Aaron Maben right there.
That's not even fair.
Yeah, but I get it though. You got a long way to go before you can convince people you can play football inside an athletic body.
He's only played football for 6 years, so he's young. Young in the game, and the knock on him is the instincts aren't there because he hasn't seen it enough.
Right.
So
yeah, he didn't start growing up as a kid and playing football. You know, he just started playing organized football in 2016.
Yeah, normally, I mean, physically gifted. In a very rare sense, he is physically gifted. But I don't know if that guy's helping you in year one. Maybe not even in year two. At this, making another jump to this level.
Yeah,
I don't know.
And, that's the thing. Maybe spin it, positive or negative.
You really have to trust your player development. You have to trust it.
And if you spin it ultimately positive, he comes in, takes off, and he's great from year one. He grasps it quick, and you give him great coaching, and he does it quick. The worst case scenario is he's out of the league in a year, right? So like the Aaron Maben syndrome, which it's usually someplace in between those, right? But even so, if he comes out and he's good, turns into a really good, maybe even a guy who can get double-digit sacks, but it takes him 3 years to get there, and you finally get to that end of it where you got a 4-year deal on a guy picked 30th overall, his 4-year deal. The 4th year, he finally does a little something. Well, then what do you do? He's got 1 year where he's pretty good, and we're going to pay a lot of money to this guy. You know what I mean? So then you're into this no man's land where what are you going to do with this guy now? He's old, or he should be entering his prime. He's had 1 good year.
Yeah,
so
it's tough, and
you'd be the same spot again.
That's the uncertainty of the draft for sure. I think we had Chuck in Hamburg next, but we lost him on the line here. I'm sorry about that. I don't think I did anything wrong there. But, Chuck, if you want to ring us back, we'll be happy to get you on. We know you were holding for a while there. Be happy to talk to you. But, yeah, I don't know. It's tempting. A lot of people get lured into that trap of rare physical traits. But, man, you better believe in your player development if you're going to take a guy that looks like he's going to need time on the job, need some seasoning, some refinement to his game. You got to trust that your coaching staff can develop that player into somebody special if you're going to make an investment like that in round one, for sure.
Right. I think at 30 – now, here's the thing. At 30, you think the guy should be able to develop into a starter at 30th overall. And then you can take what you want after that. Same thing with the second round or third round and all that. Those guys should be able to develop. Now, because of the inaccuracy of the evaluation process and how each guy's differently, and guys thrive in your system and guys don't thrive in your system, you get a guy like Matt Milano who shows up as a 5th round draft pick and plays at an elite level, high level, Pro Bowl level when he's healthy. That happens as well. The idea also is this, and I'm not going to shy away from this. I think this organization right now in its current state with Sean McDermott and his staff, you get a lot more Matt Milanos than you do Aaron Mabens.
Yes.
You get guys that show up and get better and better and better and who thrive than you did with in years past in the organization. This is an organization that gets the most out of its guys. So if it's in there to get, you got to feel like your guys are going to get it. McDermott and his crew is going to get it.
Break time for us, but when Steve and I come back, we'll wrap up your thoughts on the tweet sheet and get to a little NFL true-false. Coming up next here on One Bills Live, presented by Kaleida Health. It's Buffalo Bills Radio. Welcome back to One Bills Live. Chris Brown, Steve Tasker with you here on a Thursday. Twinning! I just looked over at you again. I'm like, son of a gun, we do have the same shirt.
It's the exact same shirt. Because usually we got the same shirt, and one will have the charging Buffalo, and one will have the OBL signal.
Oh, yeah.
Signal, and they were
We've done it,
identical.
We almost got, what did we get here? That's like September, October, November, December, January, February, March. We got like through 7 months without wearing the same shirt to work. That's a pretty good run.
That's a pretty good run.
That's a pretty good run.
But still.
Right. I get you.
Yeah.
So here we go. Back to the tweet sheet on should the success of the Bills in 2020 alter their approach of building a Super Bowl team in 2021. And we were up to JT, who says, no. Ride the wave and continue the process. Do everything you need to get over that hump and win that Lombardi Trophy. All-in mentality in 2021. Josh is a dog. He can get this team to the big one for the first time since 94. We have an all-around great roster. We can do this. See, now this is a little contradictory from JT. No offense to JT, who's a frequent contributor to the tweet sheet here on One Bills Live. But I feel like some of what he's saying could be construed as taking the other side. Because he says, do everything you need to get over the hump and win the Lombardi all-in mentality in 2021. Well, that would alter the strategy, wouldn't it, if you take that approach? A little bit.
Yeah. I don't know.
And then in the same breath, he says, we have an all-around great roster. Don't change anything.
Right.
But there's a part of me that feels like, and again, no offense to JT, but I feel like he's kind of picking both sides.
Yeah, we have an all-around great roster we can do. We have an all-around great roster we can do. I think he's saying all in with these guys.
Yeah,
you know?
Maybe that's what he's saying.
You're right. You do. There is an enormous temptation to sign that one last guy, you know.
Mm-hmm. Well, look at what Tampa did last year, and it worked.
Yeah, but that was more than one last guy. I mean,
it was three last guys.
Yeah, right? It was like
Gronk,
a handful.
Fournette, Antonio Brown.
Yeah, and who else they signed?
I mean, that was Tom after Brady. The season started.
Yeah, that was Tom Brady. Yeah, that helped.
Yeah.
And once they signed Brady, then all these other guys started jumping on board too. It's interesting. The Bills did it that, you know, with McDermott, these guys are jumping back on board. They don't want to leave the ship.
Yeah.
You know, they want to stay here.
They know they got something good.
Quentin Spain wanted to stay last year, and to his credit, Sean McDermott said, you can stay, but you got to toe the line. He did not. And he's gone. They've got guys wanting to sign here and stay here because of the atmosphere that they work and live in. And so, you know, Sean McDermott's a head coach and Tom Brady's a quarterback, but functionally what they're doing is kind of the same thing.
They have the same pull.
They're an attractive option for guys out there on the street to come in and be their best. So yeah, there is no one guy out there, despite what happened with Tom Brady last year. We all know that is going to change the face of your franchise all of a sudden like that. Brady, it looks like Brady, but it was Brady and Gronk and Antonio Brown, and it was all those guys who jumped on board when he did. Fournette. So, yeah, there is no magic elixir out there except getting great players who want to be better and who want to play for each other. That's the elixir that fixes everything for an entire team. That's what they're doing here in Buffalo, so there's no need to change.
Which goes along the lines of Dinah's comment, which is the success of 2020 says we should stick with that approach. No, we didn't get all the way, but a few small changes will make enough difference. And I think that's the approach that we've witnessed here to a large degree. You've got the main impetus of the offseason was to bring their important players back in the fold, and then you make a few small tweaks to the roster. Emmanuel Sanders, Jacob Hollister,
right?
You know, and then a draft class, and hopefully, you know, you get one or two, maybe if you're lucky, three guys that can factor into making contributions at some point this season.
Yeah, and I think that's the view we've espoused since the beginning, and I've said it over and over that everybody, after the season, it's a little bit reactionary, and I get it. All of us felt that way, that, man, the Chiefs are a team that's really tough to beat, and that's the team we got to get past. Everybody else, we went 15-2 against the entire NFL and went 0-2 against Kansas City. And one of the losses we had was on a Tuesday when we thought we were playing somebody else, and the other one was on a Hail Mary. So we were beating the stew out of every other team in the league, and we couldn't get past Kansas City.
15 wins against a tough schedule.
A very tough schedule. So we think, Kansas City's that thing. We got to get by. We got to do this. We got to do that. No. Just play better when you play that team. Just do what you do better and deploy what you do better on that day, and you'll be good enough to beat those guys. That's the bottom line. They played very well against you, and that's going to be tough to beat, and the Bills couldn't do it, and the Bills did not play well against them. So that's what you got to work on, not the process that got you to where you were in that game.
Let's go back to the phones, and we go to Chris in Buffalo. Chris, what do you have for us here on One Bills Live?
Hey, what's up, guys?
Not too much. What do you have for us?
Yeah, so I'm a big Gabe Davis guy. I'm actually contemplating getting a jersey of his. Do you guys think that he can take Beasley's spot at wide receiver too? I mean, I love Beasley too, but I have a feeling that by the end of this upcoming year, Davis might have more yards and touchdowns than him.
Well, I'm not anticipating that, certainly not at the beginning of the season, Chris. And I think Beasley is still a valuable contributor. He's coming off a career-high 92-catch season. Am I right about that? 82 or 92 catches? I can't remember.
He had, on the season, he had Davis. Wait a minute. Regular season? Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I'm looking at the – okay, I got you. 35 for 599.
Well, that's Gabe. But
yeah. And
Beasley, what do you have, 92?
Beasley had 82 for 967.
Catches. I mean, he's coming off a career-high 82-catch season, almost had 1,000 yards, and was a reliable option with a high catch rate for Josh Allen. He's not going anywhere in this
It's different
offense.
to say he'd be the second option, but I don't think there's any way that Gabe Davis becomes a slot receiver.
Yeah.
Beasley's a slot guy, and Gabe Davis is an outside guy.
Yeah. The guy that takes that position down the line in a year or two is probably Isaiah Hodgins. That's the guy that probably is your slot of the future, if you want to know the truth. Yeah.
Okay.
That's where he lined up in college and was very effective there. And more teams are using bigger players in the slot.
The first and best one was Andre Reed, and he was 6'1", 250. I mean, he was big. He was a big dude, and it's effective.
Mm-hmm.
It's effective.
And I could see them
Obviously.
going that route, when Beasley's 35 years old, and you know
right.
what I mean? So a couple of years from now, I could see Isaiah Hodgins in that role. Gabe's an outside guy. That's not to say he can't play in the slot, but if you're looking at the next best guy to put in the slot, it's probably going to be Emmanuel Sanders this year.
Unless Isaiah Hodgins bursts onto the scene.
I mean, I could see instances, Steve, where you've got Stephon and Gabriel Davis outside, and Emmanuel Sanders and Cole Beasley working double slots inside. Have fun with that.
It's a tough matchup. The word got out about the Bills last year. I mean, when they start hanging points on the Rams and hanging those points on, the Dolphins, the Jets early in the season.
Rams were a top 5 defense. Dolphins were a top 5 defense.
And they lit them up. And that was early in the season and late in the season. People were watching this offense, and they were a load, man. They were hard. It was hard to defend them. Josh back there, this huge athlete who was throwing it awesome. I mean, accurate. And you got guys that are getting separation out there, throwing with speed. And, they are a handful. And you say you want to see them run the ball better. They ain't running the ball more, I'll tell you that right now. They may get a higher per carry average, but they are not handing it off more than 40% of the time next year. They may hand it off less next year than they did this year. I mean, they're crazy to do anything but what they were doing and force people to adapt to what they did last year. And once they do, then you may start thinking about doing something else. But, man, oh, man, even if they do try and come in with an expectation of having a plan against them, the players are still way better. They're still going to win more often than not. And the way Josh makes choices, it's an impossible combination. I mean, the Bills scored 30 points a game last year. They scored 501 points.
Team record.
That's it, bro.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that you don't need to
reinvent the wheel.
Yeah. So, I ain't drafting a running back.
Yeah.
I'm drafting maybe an offensive lineman, make sure Josh stays on 2 good wheels.
And if you are drafting a running back, why would you do it in round 1 if you're going to throw the ball 40
right?
times a game? Why?
You don't.
You don't. They drafted running backs in the 3rd round each of the last 2 years before they were even throwing the ball 40 times a game.
That's right.
Round 3.
That's
now
right.
that they throw it 40 times a game, they're going to draft one in round 1? I don't know. I don't know if I can't get there.
They scored 501 points.
I suppose it's possible, but I can't get there.
So I'm
last comment on the tweet sheet, Steve. G. Nicholson says, The Bills' draft this year has to be front seven heavy. They need a youth infusion. They also have $45 million locked up on 6 players that are long in the tooth. Need 3 to 5 picks for the front seven, and I also think they need to look for a center that they can develop for next year.
Yeah, that's good. That all makes a lot of sense where we're sitting right this minute.
Long in the tooth on the D-line. I will give him that.
Yeah. Yeah. And Jerry Hughes going into his last year.
Addison, age 34 season.
Starlo Tulele, age 33 season.
I think he's 32. I don't know if he turns 33 this calendar year. I'll have to check.
So you got some guys like that. And the front seven is always critical, particularly given the fact that your secondary is set for the next year or two with the safeties and Tre'Davious and
Levi. He
Levi.
turns 32 in December, so he's 31 right now.
So he's 31. So, yeah, all that makes a lot of sense. And the offensive line, I'm all about bringing in. I think they got Ryan Bates, who does have the versatility to play all 5 spots, and he could play center and guard.
Yeah.
He's had trouble getting on the field for this team, even when they were shuffling it up front. So there's that. Maybe he'll never get there. So you need to make sure you got somebody. Yeah. So I agree with him. That's a great tweet from G. Nicholson.
G. Nicholson. Good way to end the. Well, I used his first initial.
I know. Yeah.
So
G.
Break time for us. Steve and I close it up with what we have learned from today's show. It could involve wardrobe decisions. We don't know. We'll have to see when we return here on One Bills Live, presented by Kaleida Health. It's Buffalo Bills Radio. What have we learned? Brought to you by Skyworks, the official construction equipment rental company of the Buffalo Bills. I feel like we should have fireworks sound effects for this sponsorship. In any event,
yes.
There is something that we learned on the COVID front. We had a caller earlier in the show, I believe it was Tom in West Seneca, who had crammed the whole week of shows into...
Yes, he did.
He was wondering whether or not the NFL has mandated vaccinations for players and, employees. The answer is no. And Judy Batista, our good friend from NFL Network, just tweeted out that Dr. Alan Sills, the NFL's chief medical officer, said today that the NFL and the Players Association have no plans to mandate the vaccine for players. They are going to rely on education to encourage taking it.
Wow, that's logical and reasonable.
And we've talked about this, albeit briefly on the show this week, Steve. That's a heavy lift to get players to tell
Not
them,
the education.
to mandate to them what to do and what to put in their bodies.
Yeah, the mandate is a heavy lift.
That's a slippery slope there.
That's right. It's hard to mandate people taking medication when they're fully healthy as it is. Certainly the risk is greater, obviously, and all of that. But for your that's not going to happen. But most of the guys are probably going to get it because, I grew up when you're in grade school, elementary school, you're in line down the hallway. They just line people up and we're giving vaccinations today.
Yep.
Yeah, they just did it, So I'm kind of old school that way. I'm like, whatever, give it to me, And it's like just another day at the office for me, right? So I'm kind of old school like that way. Now these new generations, and for good reasons, and they have a different view of it. So okay. Let's listen to the science and go with that way.
Couple of minor news and notes. Demarcus Robinson, the receiver, re-signs with the Kansas City Chiefs. The Cardinals trading offensive lineman Mason Cole to the Vikings for a 6th rounder. We're back tomorrow with Greg Cosell from NFL Films and the latest edition of Tasker's Teammates. You don't want to miss it. We'll see you at noon tomorrow.